Welcome to this explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here today because we're going to do something truly fascinating. If you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by the countless rules, the exceptions, and all that confusing terminology of English grammar, well, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we're demystifying the 12 English tenses, but we're not treating them as arbitrary rules you just have to memorize. No way. We're looking at them as logical, predictable, mathematical equations. We're going to take subjects, verbs, and helping verbs and treat them like variables in a formula. I promise you, once you start seeing the underlying math of grammar, it completely changes the way you understand the language. So, get ready, because we're about to decode the timeline of English.
To kick things off, consider this incredibly dramatic, almost poetic quote. Tense symbolizes the ever-moving, non-stop wheel of time which is forever busy gathering moments of future and throwing them into the dustbin of past. I mean, it sets quite an epic tone, doesn't it? But we're going to playfully contrast this profound philosophy of time and existence with literally the simplest action imaginable. To track our mathematical variables across this giant wheel of time, we'll be following one single, constant action, a woman writing a letter. By keeping the action simple, the mathematical changes in the tenses are going to become incredibly obvious.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the roadmap for our journey today. First, the wheel of time. Second, mastering present tenses. Third, exploring past tenses. Fourth, predicting future tenses. And we'll wrap up with the final grammar takeaway.
All right, part one, the wheel of time. Before we get into all those complex formulas, we really need to establish our foundation. What is tense? Well, tense simply denotes the time an action is done. Visually, we can map out these three primary domains of time. You have the past, which is everything before right now. You have the present, which is obviously now, and you have the future, which is everything after now. Our mysterious letter writer is going to be operating in all three of these domains, and as she moves from one to the other, the mathematical variables of her sentence will systematically change to reflect exactly where she is on this timeline.
Moving right along to part two, mastering present tenses. The present tense is our baseline. It represents the now. We use it to denote scientific facts, universal truths, daily habits, and ongoing actions happening as we speak. Now, what's really interesting about this is how clearly we can see the mathematical shift between a positive statement and a negative one. For the assertive rule, the formula is super straightforward. Subject plus V1 plus S or ES plus object. Basically, she writes a letter. But to make that negative, we just insert an entirely new variable. The negative rule becomes subject plus does not plus V1 plus object. So she writes a letter morphs perfectly into she does not write a letter. That does not operator is the absolute key to flipping the equation's polarity.
Now, what if we want to describe an action taking place at the exact time of speaking? We use the present continuous, and to ask a question, the interrogative rule, the formula shifts again. Notice how we pull the helping verb variable right to the very front of the equation? The formula becomes is, am, or are plus subject plus V1 plus ing plus object. Let's plug in our variables. We get, is she writing a letter? By simply moving the is to the front and sticking that ing onto the verb, we've mathematically engineered a question about an ongoing action.
To round out the present tenses, let's condense the final two rules into a sort of cheat sheet. The present perfect is for an action that started in the past and literally just finished. The formula uses a subject, has or have, and a V3 verb. She has written a letter. Contrast that directly with the present perfect continuous, which shows an action that started in the past and is still going on. The formula actually expands into a longer equation here. We insert been and add ing to the verb. She has been writing a letter. You can really see how adding those specific variables stretches the whole action out into a continuous state.
Let's move to section 3 and see how this builds. Exploring past tenses.
Okay, let's drag our letter writer back in time and reorient ourselves on the wheel. The past isn't just one giant, uniform block of time. It actually has 4 specific subdivisions depending on exactly when and how the action occurred. Working backward, we have the simple past, the past continuous, the past perfect, and way back there, the past perfect continuous. Let's see how the map handles these.
First up, let's compare a completely finished past habit against an action going on at some specific time in the past. The simple past is beautifully clean. Subject plus V2. She wrote a letter. Bam, it's done, completed. But the past continuous equation requires a few more pieces to show that ongoing past action. Subject plus was or were plus V1 plus ing. She was writing a letter. The inclusion of was and that ing suffix fundamentally alters the behavior of the sentence, stretching the action across a period of past time.
Let's break down the more complex past tenses. The past perfect describes an action completed before a certain moment in the past. The formula relies on had plus a V3 verb. She had written a letter. It is highly specific. Contrast this with the past perfect continuous. This denotes an action that began before a certain point in the past and continued up to some time in the past. The formula grows, stacking had been with an ing verb. She had been writing a letter. That had been variable acts as a really vital bridge connecting a deep past event to a slightly more recent past event.
And this brilliantly illustrates the interaction of these variables in the simple past across different sentence types. In the assertive, we use V2. She wrote a letter. But look closely at the negative and interrogative forms. We introduce the operators did or didn't. When we do that, the main verb is forced to swap back to its base V1 form. So wrote mathematically reverts to write. She didn't write a letter. Did she write a letter? It's just a perfect rule of grammatical algebra. The past tense is carried by the did, so the main verb doesn't have to carry it anymore. It's so clean.
Moving into Section 4, Predicting Future Tenses.
So, we've mastered the present and the past. Now we jump into the future. Remember that poetic quote? Time and tide wait for no man? Checking our timeline one last time, a period of time following the moment of speaking is our future tense. And just like the past and present, the future is broken into 4 distinct evolutionary forms: simple future, future continuous, future perfect, and future perfect continuous.
Let's contrast the first two right off the bat. The simple future is for a basic upcoming action. The formula is subject plus will or shall plus verb. She will write a letter. Very straightforward. But if we expect that action to be ongoing in the future, we use the future continuous. The equation expands. Subject plus will or shall plus be plus verb plus ing. She will be writing a letter. That little be variable is doing a lot of heavy lifting there to keep the action in motion.
Actually, before we hit the final future tenses, let's take a really brief focused detour to clarify a fascinating nuance regarding will and shall. The standard textbook rule is that shall is used with I and we, while will is used with all other subjects. However, when you need to make a firm commitment or a warning, these operators magically swap roles. Will takes over for I and we, and shall is used for the others. It's a brilliant little behavioral quirk in the formula. Though, to be fair, in general spoken English today, will is practically universally used. Okay, getting back on track. Let's look at the final evolutionary forms of the future tense. The future perfect expresses an action that will be fully completed by a certain time in the future. The formula combines will or shall with have and a V3 verb. She will have written a letter. The future perfect continuous equation builds on this, stacking have been with an ing verb. What's absolutely vital here is that continued time references are what differentiate the two. Without a time reference, it's just future continuous. The have been specifically requires a duration of time before a future event. Let's look at our final comprehensive cheat sheet matrix focusing on the future perfect. When formulas get this long, figuring out where to place negative modifiers can be kind of tricky. Notice precisely where the not variable gets inserted into this complex multi-word equation. It always goes immediately after the will or shall. So it's not she will have not written. It is strictly she will not have written a letter. The mathematical order of operations here is absolute. You literally can't mess it up if you follow the formula.
And finally, Section 5, the final grammar takeaway.
So, we have successfully tracked our letter writer across the past, present, and future. The crucial point now is synthesizing all this data into something we can use every single day. The main takeaways here are actually super empowering. First, tense merely tracks the wheel of time. It tells us exactly where an action sits on the timeline. Second, the rules are not arbitrary magic designed to confuse you. They act as logical math equations. Variables like ing, have, been, and did simply snap into place to build the exact meaning you need. And finally, repetitive practice with a single simple phrase, like she writes a letter, locks in the structure so you can apply it to literally any verb in the English language.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer. I want to leave you with this final, highly complex equation from our journey. Look at this sentence. Will she not have been writing a letter? Look at all those variables stacked together. Based on the mathematical formulas we've explored today, what exact tense is this? I challenge you to identify the formula and the tense. Thank you so much for joining me to crack the code of English grammar. Keep looking for the math in the language and keep learning.